All right, hi everybody, Jeremy Dickinson here. I thank you all for watching. In this video, I'll be talking about Judith Jarvis Thomson's 1985 paper, The Trolley Problem. So Thomson is one of the founders of what we call trolleyology. There's the study of trolley cases, of course. There she is. Thomson, emeritus at MIT, has done significant work for probably the last um, 50 years at least in philosophy, um, and produced top-notch work, influential work. And this is one of her most famous papers. Her most famous paper, though, is probably A Defense of Abortion. She published in 1971. But that's not our topic this time. It's this paper. But she has other major contributions to philosophy, which I encourage you to check out if you're interested. Let me know if you need some guidance on that. As you know, since you've read uh, some of Thomson's paper, at least the first part, hopefully by now, Thomson, she credits Flip a Foot with being the founder of trolleyology. In a paper called Abortion and the Doctrine of Double Effect, Flip a Foot develops some trolley cases to think about. So Flip a Foot, an important philosopher in her own right, really in generations prior to Thomson, but she did a lot of important work in the middle of the 20th century, really up to the 21st century, early part of the 21st century, uh, predominantly a moral philosopher in the Aristotelian virtue ethics tradition, if that means anything to you. So what it means roughly, she stood on the shoulders of Aristotle's ethics in developing an ethical theory, a moral philosophy. We can use those terms interchangeably for now. And quick fact about her is she was the granddaughter of Grover Cleveland, the only other president besides the current one who served in non-consecutive terms as president. Okay, so that's just a little bit about Flip a Foot, the founder of trolleyology. Thomson, though, is building off of her in her paper and considers Foot's solution to the trolley problem. But in order to get the trolley problem off the ground, we need to think about the original trolley case. And it's important to recognize that the original trolley case is not the trolley problem itself. We're getting to that, but you need to know the original trolley case, as we call it, in order to know what the trolley problem is. So let's go to, sometimes I'll just call it OT, original trolley, the trolley driver case. So here's a trolley driver, just rounds the bend. Here's our first trolley case we're thinking about. There's 5 people that the trolley driver can't avoid hitting, at least at first glance. And if the trolley driver were to hit the 5, they would all die, given how fast the trolley is going, and given how the trolley can't brake in enough time. Lo and behold, there's a spur of track that the trolley can be turned onto. At first, it seems like that's a miracle, but there ends up being a single track worker on that side. So now a decision has to be made. Sacrifice the 1 for the 5 or not. Moral verdict in the case, okay, everything's debatable, right? But Thomson, she delivers some, I guess, anecdotal polling that she had accumulated, where she says, just about everyone says it's acceptable, morally acceptable, to sacrifice the 1 to save the 5. And some would even claim that it's morally required. Okay, so of course, what's required is acceptable. You're always allowed to do what you should do. But not everything that is permissible to do is something that you should do. Okay, because at least according to ordinary moral thinking, it might be permissible for me to, I don't know, have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with respect to morality, like no big deal. But it's not required of me to do so. Of course, this is a more morally loaded case. I'm just trying to capture the difference between saying something is acceptable, morally speaking, versus obligatory, despite the fact that there's overlap between the two. Way maybe capturing that idea is that there's what's morally permissible, and then perhaps we could think about that as the umbrella concept, and then underneath it, we can consider how there's, on the one hand, what's morally required, and then what's merely morally permissible, as we might call it that. Okay, so it looks like there's widespread agreement on this. My informal anecdotal polling of students across the years, probably well over 20 years now, suggests that Thomson's right about this. Okay, let's go back to the slides here. Just wanted to give you the first Trolley case and then capture this point here. Well, some might take the explanation for the more permissibility of killing the one in order to save the five, so the sacrifice being acceptable or required to support the moral theory called utilitarianism. Okay, so this is, maybe a bit of a side note, not an irrelevant one. I mean, I think it's sort of important context potentially. So when you look at the original Trolley case, you think about, well, there's a +4 lives saved, and all things being equal, supposing everyone here is morally upstanding, they're all strangers to you. All things being equal, we want to promote happiness in the world, or the best consequences in the world. And the way we can do so, again, all things being equal, is save as many lives as we can. And that would be to sacrifice the one for the five. Okay, and some people might want to say, well, like the correct moral theory, utilitarianism, as they think, vindicates it or predicts that that's the case. But what is utilitarianism? Just so we're clear, I think many of you likely know what utilitarianism is. In case you don't, the way I like to think about it is the ethical theory, very, very general ethical theory, claiming that the right action or the permissible action, okay, so we might understand rightness in broad terms as including the permissible. There's debates on this stuff, as you can imagine, but we can stipulate that for our purposes now. The right action in any situation is the one that, on balance, promotes happiness for all who are affected by the action. Okay, so here we're thinking about promoting the good consequences in the world. What are those good consequences for utilitarian happiness? So bringing about happiness, not just for oneself, but for as many as one, for as many as who would be affected by the action, as many as would be affected by the action. Let me get that sentence right. So one way that one could promote happiness is by maximizing. Another way would be to bring about enough. And there's debates about which version of utilitarianism is correct. Okay, but as it turns out, philosophers like Foote and Thomson and others on the score disagree. And they'd want to challenge the utilitarian view. So then utilitarianism is not going to be on the table for someone like Thomson when we get to thinking about the trolley problem. Okay, to see why, let's think about the transplant case. So no trolleys, but this is a case introduced early on in Thomson's paper where we have a surgeon who has 5 dying patients in their office. Okay, they need to come up with some organs quickly. 5 of them, so there's organ failure in each case. A kidney, right? A heart, a lung, a liver, whatever. Okay. So the surgeons were scratching their head. What can I do? I don't have any organs to save these people's lives. If I only had them, I'm an awesome surgeon. I could do the relevant surgeries. Well, in walks healthy patient HP, who is a perfect tissue match. Maybe there's some kind of laser scanner at the door as soon as HP walks in, and it goes ding, 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 and the surgeon's notified. Oh, we've got a healthy patient with irrelevant tissue matches, and that means he, she, they have the 5 organs needed. So here comes the question: can surgeon permissibly sacrifice healthy patient for the dying patients. So the dying patients, they'll die by the end of the day or some such. If surgeon doesn't harvest HP's organs in order to save the five. Now, surgeon, if you were to ask healthy patient would say no way. Okay, so surgeon, we want to know, can he acceptably force healthy patient to sacrifice his life, his organs, in order to save the dying patients? Okay. And if you're like me, if you're like most people who hear this case, the answer is clearly no. There'd be something morally wrong here in this case. But that's interesting, right? Because it looks like the right thing to do is bring about a worse state of the world with respect to the promotion of happiness. We could suppose that the five dying patients, if they were allowed to live, if they were to survive their current conditions, that they would go on to live long, happy lives and experience much more happiness than one single healthy patient would. We could suppose that, but it still seems like it's the wrong result to claim that the healthy patient, right, should be or could be morally acceptably sacrificed to save the five. So it looks like utilitarianism is not vindicated, and utilitarian solution to the upcoming trolley problem will not be on the table because it seems just patently false. Okay. As you imagine, there's debates about all this. I'm just delivering some of Thomson's results and a little bit of context there. So then here's the trolley problem. What explains the moral difference between original trolley and transplant cases? In the original trolley case, it's acceptable, perhaps required, to sacrifice the one to save the five. But in transplant case, it's the opposite. It's, severely wrong to sacrifice the one in order to save the five. So what gives? What explains this moral difference in the cases? As anticipated, whatever explains the difference, it's got to be something non-utilitarian. Okay. So let's argue. Okay, so Foote's solution is, as Thomson wants it, tip or cap to Foote, and then critiquer is that in original trolley, it's a case of killing versus killing. Do you kill one or you kill five, as Foote thinks about it? And in such cases, when you can kill one or kill five, all things being equal, it's better to kill the one than it is to kill five. Okay, I say all things being equal because suppose the one is your mom, or suppose the one is someone else that you deeply love. So there's all kinds of ways we can revise the case. We're just thinking about the case as it was originally presented. So there's the mom trolley case, but that's different from the original trolley case. Let's just make that clear. Just like we felt the Hitler case, Hitler's in the five or something like that, or Stalin. Okay, but these are just different versions, the different kinds of cases to think about. So, but in transplant, what Foote wants to argue is that we have to consider the moral difference between killing on the one hand and letting die on the other. And it's morally worse to kill someone than it is to let them die. It's morally worse to kill one even than it is to let five die. So those who think that there's a significant moral difference between killing and letting die are very likely to think that when you take five people who you'd be letting die versus killing one in order to save those five, it's better to let the five die than it is to kill one, because that's how seriously morally wrong it is to intend to kill someone. Okay, so what's going to happen to the five dying patients if they don't get their organs? We know, well, they're just going to be let to die. Okay, in those cases. Okay, so So, think about it. It's like if we think about helping the five, what we're doing is in some sense we're providing them with some kind of like positive benefit or some such. And we have to compare that with sort of the negative um, um, duties that we have, right? Not to interfere with people. I think about how stringent um, the negative duties that we have are the duty not to interfere with others. And if we were to kill the one, we would be interfering with that person's right to life, their right to continued existence or some such. But if we do nothing and let the five die, we're not um, messing with their negative rights, and they may have some claim, some positive claims to help and all the rest, but not at the expense of violating very stringent negative rights. We have to like positively benefit the five as opposed to um, avoid interfering with healthy patients, right, not to be killed. Okay. More of that will make sense later, but for some of you, that line of reasoning might be helpful, and that's behind Foote's reasoning, thinking about the killing versus letting die distinction. Thomson thinks that Foote is wrong, at least in her 1985 paper. So on page 1397 of the paper, Thomson develops the bicentennial switch case. Another picture of a whiteboard. That's hopefully helpful. So bystander case, bystander at the switch case. That's what Thomson calls it. So you have this bystander becomes relevant to the case because the trolley driver faints when the trolley driver sees the five track workers in front of him or them. Okay. So this fainting occurs. So bystanders there, but bystander's been sizing up the situation. And the way I see the case is the there's a default direction which is just straight ahead. So the bystander can either flip the switch, which would sacrifice the one for the five, or could just let the trolley smash and kill the five. So what can the bystander do? Well, Thomson says seems pretty clear that the bystander can, in this case, flip the switch to kill the one. Not that the bystander has to do that, but the bystander can come in and choose to do it. Bystander could also acceptably say, I'm out. I don't want to have anything to do with this. This is too morally tough, or I don't want to be responsible for anyone's deaths, etc. So Thomson's claim is that the bystander could do something to redirect the trolley away, redirect the danger that the trolley represents away from the five, the many, to the few, the one in the bystander case. So what's supposed to be significant here is that it's not better to let five die, which would happen if the bystander just lets the trolley smash into the five, than it is to kill the one. Okay, so the killing versus letting die principle claims that, but that seems to be the wrong result, at least according to Thomson. Okay, so Thomson claims that it's not better to let the five die than it is to kill the one in the case. So Foote's solution fails. So given that both options are open to the bystander, that's the reason why it's not better. So the KLD, the killing versus letting die principle, fails. And so now perhaps we need to consider another solution. Let's see if I can make this a little bigger for you. Not messing up the slide real quick here. So maybe make this 24. Well, that's probably a little better. So perhaps we need to consider what's called the Kantian solution. So there's a 18th century German philosopher named Immanuel Kant, and he's famous for this anti-utilitarian principle called the formula of humanity. It's a version of his categorical imperative. For some of you who've heard of this before, or if you've heard of the Kant's categorical imperative before, This is one of the formulations of it, and here's how I capture it. It's captured differently in different places, but here's how I capture it. Necessarily, so in every possible circumstance, at least is one way of understanding what it means to say necessarily. It's morally wrong to treat humanity, right, human beings, as a mere means to one's ends, and it's morally required that one treat humanity as an end in itself. Okay, that's a lot of words, and some of it's a little tricky. But what Kant's trying to capture here um, in this principle is something like you can never treat human beings, whether it's another human being or yourself, as a mere tool or instrument for your purposes. Okay, so um, some who endorse this principle would consider something like enslaving someone as counting as like a paradigmatic case of using someone as a mere instrument or tool for one's purposes, one's ends. And the second part is, we're always required to treat others, human beings, as ends in themselves, meaning we're treated as if we have value in our own right, not such that we only have value with respect to what we can bring about for someone. So you might think that just, there's in general two different kinds of value that we ascribe to things. There's instrumental value, the value that we say something has in virtue of what it can get us. Okay, and then there's the kind of value that something has by its very nature. And what Kant is saying is that we can never treat human beings as if they merely have this kind of instrumental value or the kind of value that we can assign a price to. But rather, we always have to treat people as if they're priceless, as if they're valuable in their own right and significantly valuable. Kant, he discusses this idea that that evidence that we that human beings have this kind of value is captured in the idea that we don't think there's any price that we can assign to human life. Okay, we're thinking about like their actual value, setting aside life insurance policies, if you will, for the moment. Okay, so that's what we're thinking about the formula of humanity. So thus, here's how the solution would go. One doesn't violate the formula of humanity merely by killing someone in order to save the five in the original Trolley case. Okay, more would have to go into explaining like why that's the case, but it's important to note that for Kant and Kantians in general, the formula of humanity is supposed to be consistent with um, uh, it being permissible in some cases to kill. Okay, so you don't thereby violate the formula of humanity by killing someone. Okay. If you want to talk about that, let me know. Shoot me an email or come to office hours. But um, that's how the solution is supposed to go, at least initially. And then the second point is but surgeon in the transplant case, he violates the formula of humanity by killing HP in order to save, by killing the healthy patient in order to save the dying patients. Okay, so the reasons they're supposed to be something like the surgeon has to treat the healthy patient um, as a mere means, as a mere instrument for achieving his aim, and that is to save the five. Um, um, the in a way, the healthy patient is like required as a means to the end of saving the five. But in the original Trolley case, um, the one didn't have to be there on the track. It's just the one that happens to be there. So it's true that there's a sacrifice in that case, but not all sacrifices end up being equal in this regard. Um, so if the one were to miraculously not be there, and the trolley driver could direct the trolley toward to the spur where there's nobody, that'd be great. Okay, but the surgeon needs the organs from the healthy patient. So that's the way, at least initially, capturing the Kantian solution. Okay, because you might think it's a paradigmatic case of violating the formula of humanity is by killing someone or sacrificing them. But Kant and other Kantians don't think so. But Thomson once again thinks that this solution fails. To see why, what we need to do is we need to look again at another trolley case. We need to look at a variation of the bystander case, which is called the loop case. So here's loop. So everything is the same. We got bystander. We got the person in the trolley who faints, the trolley driver fainting. And then what we do is we add mass to the one track worker. And we'll call this track worker portly fella. In some works, even this work, even the 1985 Thomson work, he's called the fat man. Okay, so if you like, call him fat man. I've long called him portly fella. Okay, portly meaning like robust, large, and large enough to stop a trolley, let's say. Okay, and then we add some looping track. So we add mass here, and we add track here. The default direction is the same. Now, the formula of humanity, the Kantian principle we've just discussed, would seem to predict that the bystander in this case can't flip the switch, cannot flip the switch. Just make sure I'm saying that clearly enough, where you cannot flip the switch to have the trolley smash into the portly fella, thus stopping the trolley, but killing the portly fella, or the fat man, while he's at it, in order to save the 5. Okay, if this is just some single track worker who doesn't have the mass, well, killing, redirecting the trolley, in this case would just lead to 6 deaths, we could suppose. So that's the significance of adding the mass and adding the looping track. And again, the formula of humanity would seem to predict that that's wrong. Okay, so what gives? Well, Thomson wants to say that in this case, by adding mass to the track worker, by making him fat, as she would put it, and by adding looping track, we haven't done anything to morally change the case from the bystander case. So she explicitly says that adding mass and adding track to the bystander case, doesn't morally change it. Thus, if it's morally acceptable in the bystander at the switch case for bystander to flip the switch to kill the 1 to save the 5, then it's also acceptable in the loop case to do that, which according to Thomson then means that the formula of humanity as a principle fails and thus can't be used to solve the trolley problem. So, just to summarize, since it's permissible to kill the portly fella, fat man, in the loop case, Kant's formula of humanity isn't true. So it can't be used to explain the moral difference between original trolley and transplant. Okay, a lot of moving parts there, and some of this is new to you. So if there's any questions, always feel free to reach out. Okay, so let's just take a step back here. So trolleyology can be used to help us think about and or evaluate ethical or moral principles and theories. Here are some that we've discussed so far: utilitarianism, kill is worse than letting die. That principle, again, according to that, is typically, some claim that there's some significant or deep difference between intending to kill someone and carrying out that action and then letting someone die. And typically in the background of that is thinking about the difference between positive and negative rights and duties, which we'll talk about more. And then this formula of humanity. So we've seen that trolleyology, if the transplant case is correct, gives us reason to doubt the truth of utilitarianism. And we've seen how the bystander case gives us reason to challenge the killing is worse than any die principle. And we've seen via the loop case how the formula of humanity might be false. So none of these principles could be used, given they're not generally true, to solve the trolley problem. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. And what I'd recommend is if any of the discussion of these principles or theories requires further thinking or studying, rewind the video, take some time to look at how we've explained these ideas. Okay, so the trolley problem, just again, so we're clear, given Thomson's original formulation, is what explains the moral difference between original trolley and transplant? What explains that crucial difference? And note that it's not the original trolley case, that's the trolley problem, it's this. Okay, we're going to see that the formulation will change in terms of the cases coming up, but at least this is the original formulation of it, and the change will be a minor one. And the trolleyology cases so far, again, if we just take a step back, I know there's a lot of cases and a lot of details, for you, especially if this is the first time you thought about them, or even you just begun thinking about them, even though you've heard about them before. There's the original trolley case or the trolley driver case, okay, where it's kill, it looks like it's kill 1 or kill 5. It's that original case. And then there's a transplant case where you have the surgeon who has 5 dying patients and a healthy patient. Okay, the verdict of the original trolley case, we remember, was at least intuitively, initially, is that it's acceptable to sacrifice the 1 to save the 5. But in transplant, it didn't seem like it was acceptable to sacrifice healthy patients for the dying patients. Again, what explains that moral difference? Some might say it's a killing versus dying die principle, so they run the bystander. So then Thomson runs the bystander case, the switch case, to show that the killing versus dying die principle won't explain the moral difference. This is because we have a case where it's not better to let 5 die than it is to kill 1. In the case, again, if Thomson's correct. And then some might say, well, let's appeal to Kant and Kant's categorical imperative, the formula of humanity therein, to explain or to solve the trolley problem, to explain the moral difference between original trolley and transplant. But that won't work because all Thomson's done when she develops a loop case is add some mass, portly fella, and some looping track to the case, but that can't explain a moral difference between a bystander and loop. So if it's acceptable for bystander to flip the switch, right, killing the 1, in order to save the 5, then it's also acceptable in loop. So the formula of humanity looks like it's been debunked. Okay. As I said, there's debates about all this stuff, but this is at least the presentation of Thomson. Okay, then back to the theories and principles so far, just so we're clear here. I know I've given some formulations of these theories/principles, but I just want to simplify things a little bit to help you out. If it's helpful with utilitarianism, understand it as the slogan, promote the happiness of all. Okay, so it's a slogan. It's supposed to just guide us. I'm thinking about what utilitarianism is. Well, killing versus letting die. Killing is morally worse than letting die. That's already slogan-esque, isn't it? So you could use that one. And then the formula of humanity, treat humanity as an end in itself. Let that be the slogan for it. Okay. And then we can work out the details as needed. But I wanted to get you some slogans to guide you. Okay. So what's Thomson's solution? So when Thomson gets close to developing her solution to the trolley problem, she focuses on bystander and transplant instead of original trolley or trolley driver and transplant. So she could say then revises the original trolley problem to include different cases, or at least one different case. So the question becomes, in the second half of the paper, what explains the moral difference between bystander and transplant? Okay. The problem is still the same, right? What explains why in bystander can flip the switch, thus killing the one to save the five, but why can't the surgeon in the transplant case sacrifice the one, the healthy patient, to save the five, the dying patients? Okay, so that issue is still on the table. And as it's going to turn out, Thomson's solution is going to involve the concept of a right. And so what I'll do is stop sharing here, and I'll go ahead and take a break from this trolleyology discussion. And in the next video, I'll pick up on developing this idea of what a right is and say some intuitive things about it, hopefully. And then talk about how Thomson uses the concept of a right to try to solve what she understands as the trolley problem. Okay, so that'll be the game plan in the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon.